Now, if you're a solo player like myself, you're constantly finding new ways to actually deal with more challenging content inside of Destiny 2. Now, Bungie has changed the ways that we deal with champions, and they've overall increased the difficulty of a lot of activities inside of Destiny 2. And while I was playing Defiant Battlegrounds and doing Legend Lost Sectors, pretty much on that power grind, trying to get my power level up, I decided to take a look at my vault and see what I haven't used in a long time and what would pair well with Strand. Now, this brought me to the 6 Coyote, which basically gives me a second dodge charge, and I thought to myself, well, I'll actually be able to suspend more targets with the 6 Coyote if I have that ability uptime and I'm able to continuously dodge. And that's pretty much the play with this build. And then I thought to myself, what weapon have I been using recently pretty much with every class, which is Osteo-Striga, and it pairs very nice with the 6 Coyote. And that brings me to the name of my build, which I'm going to call this build Toxic Coyote. Now, this build is not for the faint of heart. You actually have to rush your enemies a lot more, and you do have to play a little bit more aggressive. So it's not a passive build by no means, especially when you're dealing with more difficult content. You are going to have to suspend a lot of targets, and you're pretty much immobilizing everybody. Immobilizing all of my enemies brought me a lot of satisfaction when I was actually playing the game. So I figured I would make a build on this, and that brings me to the build right now. We're going to talk about what you need to make this actually work, and what supporting mods could actually give you more higher ability uptime. Now, one thing I would like to mention with this build is Bungie did give us all of our mods. So you have every mod that's ever been in the game has been unlocked or reworked. So anybody can actually use this build. The only drawback with this build is I'm using Osteo-Striga. It pairs very nicely with the 6 Coyote and everything that I have going on with this build. The only way that you can get Osteo-Striga now is if you purchase the Witch Queen expansion and you actually complete the campaign. That is the way that you unlock it now. It used to actually be a pre-order weapon, but they've actually unlocked the weapon for everybody as long as you play through the Witch Queen campaign. So now that we got all of that out of the way, first and foremost, you're going to be on the Hunter class, obviously, and you will have to complete the Lightfall campaign to unlock Strand, or pay for the boost if you have completed the Lightfall campaign on another character, which I believe is 20 bucks. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend just playing through the campaign. Now, we will be using the Threaded Spike melee. We'll also be using the grapple grenade. This works very well with this build because you're able to grapple enemies and then do a melee damage. Now, we only have 2 aspects, but the main one that's important is Ensnaring Slam, which basically suspends targets and it immobilizes them. So that is one of the main cores of this build. You use that with the 6 Coyote. Now, I'm also using Thread of Warning. I'm using Thread of Generation, which dealing damage generates grenade energy, which is important. Thread of Ascent, which reloads your equipped weapons and gives you an increase in airborne effectiveness and handling for a short duration. Plus, it gives you a +10 in mobility, which we'll need to increase our uptime on our dodge. Now, we're also using Thread of Continuity, which basically it allows our suspend to last a lot longer than it normally would. So these are the best fragments for this build. Now, we're also using, like I said, Osteo-Striga, which pretty much it deals poison damage over time and it spreads to enemies on kills, and it also reloads the magazine on poison final blows. So it is a very good weapon. I've had this weapon overflow to about 80 rounds per mag, and it just keeps on going and going. Osteo-Striga works very well, like I said, with the Strand subclass, so I've been using it a lot lately. Now, I'm also using Glacioclasm, which is a weapon from the Dawning event. You don't really have to use this. This really doesn't pertain to the build at all. I'm just using it because there's a lot of void shields inside the Defiant Battleground, and I just needed a way to take care of them. Now, you could use other weapons for that option, but I decided not to. And like I said, some of my gear is not actually all the way masterworked. I am still working on that power grind, but the main things that you need here are the 6 Coyote for the double dodge, and then Osteo-Striga. Now, there are a couple of mods that you can actually use to actually boost the overall effectiveness and perfect this build. One of those being Bomber, and it basically states reducing grenade cooldown when you use your class ability. Now, also too, I am using Kinetic Siphon, which basically states rapid kinetic final blows create an orb of power, which that synergizes really well with my build because I am using Thread of Warding, which grants me Woven Mail when I pick up an Orb of Power, which Woven Mail is basically like an overshield over your body, but not your head. So you will take reduced damage with the threat of warding. And collecting Orb of Power also gives you other benefits as far as like your super, and then if you have other supporting mods that grant you class ability energy, those Orbs of Power can actually be beneficial to you. Orbs of Power are a great way to maximize your ability uptime, so I highly recommend using some form of Siphon mod, especially if you are going to go with this build and use Osteostriga. I recommend you using Kinetic Siphon. Now, this build is a fantastic build to play with. Do you absolutely need Osteostriga? No, not necessarily. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't have the weapon just because they did not play Witch Queen, they did not pre-order. It's pretty much the same circumstance with the Quicksilver Storm weapon that I actually reviewed. I did get a lot of comments on my other social media platforms in regards to a lot of people not having it just because they did not pay or they did not pre-order the weapon. And now that Lightfall's out, the people that have bought Lightfall, they're pretty much SOL. So the only way you could get it now is to actually purchase the premium edition of Lightfall, and I believe you have to do that again. Don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure. I know when Lightfall was announced, I pre-ordered it immediately and I actually unlocked the gun. That's pretty much what I do every year. When a new expansion drops, I always pre-order it. Now, if you are doing solo content with this build and you're having a tough time actually being a little aggressive with your enemies, you can swap out your grenade for a suspending grenade, and that can actually get the ball rolling, especially with unstoppable champions. That's one of the main reasons why I've actually started using this build, is I'm able to use my ensnaring slam and suspend unstoppable champions, and that allows me to disrupt them essentially. So they're immobile and I'm able to kill them a lot quicker, and you just chaining the slam back to back over and over again until he's dead. And that's pretty much the gameplay loop of this build, and it's also very good when there's numerous amounts of targets, because like I said, once you suspend those targets and then you're firing Osteostriga, you're spreading that poison to each target and they all just pretty much die. And then on top of that, you end up creating a tangle, and you can throw that tangle because once you suspend them, once you defeat them, you actually sever the other targets in the vicinity, and it's just a snowball effect from there. Now, when you have a fire team, the gameplay loop is a little bit different, so you actually have teammates, so you're not by yourself essentially. Now, I recommend sticking with the grapple grenade, because the grapple grenade allows you to push up on your enemies in a faster pace. So you're able to grapple your enemy, and then you hit them with the melee, and then you go off and do your ensnaring slam, and that suspends them, and then you pretty much immobilize everybody in the main area. So that's pretty much a gameplay loop when you are doing like Nightfall Strikes or any type of Battlegrounds or Gambit or anything like that. Now, this build does work inside of PvP, though I am still getting used to the ensnaring slam. Sometimes I find that my Guardian actually tracks to the wrong location, or the Warlocks especially, they'll like Icarus dash out of the way and I can't quite get on them like I want to. But this is mainly a PvE build. This isn't really something that you want to take inside of PvP. I thought it was a fun build. It absolutely immobilizes everyone, and it makes the content a lot easier to actually get through. Of course, there are other builds out there that we will be going over in the future. Expect my next build to probably center around Osteostriga, just because it is just so powerful with the new strand subclass, and it absolutely wrecks. I know I've been getting comments about a lot of guys not being able to beat the legendary campaign. Osteostriga is the way to go. It really doesn't matter the subclass that you use, especially my second and third playthroughs. I was able to just melt the Tormentors, Callus, everybody with the Osteostriga, especially since it tracks to your targets and it spreads that poison damage. There's really no other weapon out there that can compete with Osteostriga right now, and I am expecting it to get nerfed eventually. Now, if you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to like my video and also subscribe to my channel. It's greatly appreciated, and it's a free way to support me. I will have more builds coming out in the future. I am currently working on that bow video that I promised you guys, so stay tuned for that. I will see you all in the next video. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.